Welcome back to Cycling Unboxed. Today I have a very interesting video for you. I have the Canyon Ultimate and I also have the Canyon Aeroad. I'm going to be going Federico style. So that means I'm going to be comparing the feel of the bikes, you know, what feels better to ride, what's better to climb in, what's better on the flats, what feels more comfortable, which one of the handling do I like more. Then hopefully by the end of the video, I will have a better idea of which one I would like to take home with me if I was to choose between these two bikes. I'm also going to be ranking these bikes compared to other bicycles that I have ridden, and you're going to see how that works at the end of the video as well. So without further ado, let's jump on one of these bikes and get rolling. I am back home. I've managed 60 kilometers on each bike, and I've also managed 750 meters of climbing on each bike as well. On the course, there were some steep hills, there were some shallower hills, there were some rolling sections, and there were some flat sections. So I think I've got a pretty damn good idea of how these bikes feel, and I can give you a good comparison about them. Right, let's get into it. I'm going to kick it off with the handling, as that's one of the things that you notice straight away. So for the Aeroad, I am at Box Hill here, and I just want to talk about the handling of the bike. And this handling is different. Is once you've chosen a line that you want to do through a corner, it kind of just holds that line, and the bike doesn't like you coming off that line. I would say it'd probably take you about 2 weeks or so to get used to riding this bike in terms of the handling if you want to get it nailed down. It's not like a Specialized where it doesn't matter, first person can jump on it and they'll know how to ride it right away. But this bike, less so. The way I'd describe it is kind of like riding on rails. Once you've chosen that course, that's the course the bike's going to, or wants to go. Riding on rails for the Aeroad. So there it is. The handling isn't bad on the Aeroad, it just doesn't feel good like this one. I really enjoyed the handling on the Ultimate. It felt more nimble, it felt more flickable. It didn't feel like once I committed to a line on a corner, if a car came around the other side, I could just adjust and move out. I could just put the bike where I wanted to a lot better than I could on the Aeroad. So the Ultimate gets a better rating for me. I've now got my hands on the Ultimate, and I gotta say, instantaneously, this is a different bike. It feels vastly different to the Aeroad. After getting on this, the Aeroad kind of feels like a time trial bike with drop handlebars, is what I kind of liken it to. This feels much more traditional, and initial impressions, I think I'm enjoying this bike more so far. For me, because of that learning curve and the feeling of the handling, the Aeroad only scores a 6 out of 10 for me, as some bikes you can just jump on them and absolutely rail them around corners. This isn't one of them. You're gonna have to get used to the way that it feels before you can get really good at handling the bike. The Ultimate, on the other hand, it scores an 8 out of 10 for me. It feels much more nimble, much funner to use, easier around the corners, and I think pretty much anyone can jump on this bike and get to grips with it within the first ride. Wind stability. This is what you would expect here. I'm quite a heavy guy at 85 kilos, 6'4", so the wind doesn't really affect me too much, but I could notice the difference between the Aeroad and the Ultimate. The Ultimate, I felt like the wind didn't even touch me at all today. We had some fairly strong gusts today, so quite good for the testing there. Right then, for me, that means the Ultimate scores an 8 out of 10. It's very stable in the winds. Most people can handle this bike. The Aeroad, on the other hand, it scores just a 5 out of 10. As I said, it's not bad. It's not like you can't handle the bike in the wind at all, but it's another learning curve to get around and another thing to feel on the bike. That brings me onto climbing. Now, when climbing on the Aeroad, actually, it doesn't feel like it does on the flats. It has a deader sort of feel. That kind of forward propulsion you get from the pedaling on the flats doesn't feel like it happens on the uphill. Just feels like every movement you're putting in doesn't have that snappy back and forth feeling on like a normal climbing bike. It is missing that. This is a bike that's definitely better in the saddle. You feel like you get a lot more propulsion and stuff. I've just come up Staple here, and when you get up the saddle, it just doesn't feel as good, but when you're in the saddle, it feels like you've really got the power. So there's how I felt about the Aeroad. Let's move on to how I feel about the Ultimate. The bike is so much flickier. It responds so much faster when you're out the saddle, and to be honest, even when you're in the saddle, but only when you're climbing. It's just really easy to use and just put the power down. It feels light underneath your body. The Ultimate really did feel a lot better when climbing, as you would expect. I mean, you're talking about a climbing bike versus an aero bike. It is the difference that you would think you're going to feel. And honestly, it felt lighter underneath you. Now, this isn't something that you should really feel that much. It's just like a kilo or maybe 2 kilos lighter. That isn't that much weight, but honestly, it felt so much lighter, the Ultimate. Next up, for my categories, we have how it feels when you are sprinting. I do enjoy how this bike feels for sprinting. It's when you push hard, you push it over 1300 watts, feels like it really accelerates underneath you, and you can really use that power. As I said, when it's fast, it's really fast. It's a lot of fun. When it comes to sprinting, it actually feels better on the Ultimate than it does the Aeroad, because you're out the saddle, but it doesn't feel as fast. It just feels more snappy, more propulsive. But when you're in the saddle, in the Aeroad, that feels more propulsive than the Ultimate. And it's a nicer experience in the saddle, but better out the saddle for the Ultimate. Well, for those reasons, as I've just stated on the bike, I prefer the Ultimate for sprinting, surprisingly, because it does feel way better out the saddle. So for me, that gives the Ultimate a 9 out of 10 for sprint feel, and the Aero is just going to get a 7 out of 10. It's just that dead feeling when you're out the saddle on the bike. Flat and rolling terrain. Here is where you would expect the Aero to shine through, and it really, really shines through. On the German Tour magazine, they actually test this as one of the fastest bikes that you can buy as just an aerodynamic frame, and it really, really feels like that. Underneath you, you can kind of hear that whooshing, like when you're going really fast over like 35 k's an hour, and it feels like it just holds that speed really, really well. Now, one thing I'll give this bike is on the flats, it feels eager. Like I said, it just carries speed so easily, and it makes you want to push more and push harder, so you carry more speed. It does have that factor feeling to it. Along the flats and the straights, this bike carries itself really well. It's close to the Aeroad, but there is a big difference still. Like the Aeroad just carries so much more speed. This bike, it just feels like you have to put that little bit more work in where the speed kick picks up when you're going over 35 k's an hour. The Aeroad feels really good for that. This left side. When I compare the Aeroad here to the Ultimate along the flats and rolling, the Ultimate, you know what? It did feel like a normal bike. Like it felt like it rolled nicely. It felt like you held speed well, but this just felt like it had a level above. When I was trying to compare the speed differences, I didn't really notice any difference when I was looking at the Garmin, but just from a feeling perspective, this really felt like it rolled fast all of the time. So where's that gonna go in my ranking? This gets a solid 10 out of 10. Honestly, it feels like the fastest bike I've ever ridden on a flat road ever. It's like a TT bike with drop handlebars is what it's like. It's fast. For the Ultimate, I'm only gonna give it a 6 out of 10 in this category, purely because I just felt nothing special when I was on those flats and rolling surfaces. It didn't feel like it held the speed as well, but I just wasn't wowed by it like I was with this bike. A really important category, I think, is comfort. And the reason being, you're going to be spending a lot of time on these bikes. So let's see how they were on the road, starting with the Aeroad. Second thing I have to report is, well, you can really feel this deeper seat post. The front end is actually quite comfortable. I can't feel too much coming through there, but the bum end, well, I can feel a lot coming through there. It's definitely a harsher ride, and I think it is that deep seat post causing that. Now let's compare that to the Ultimate. When it comes to comfort, it is honestly night and day. Over the lumps, bumps and vibrations, especially here on the British roads, you can really, really tell that the Ultimate is more comfortable. It just smooths them out better. The front end on the hands, that feels exactly the same, but the back end on your bum, that is better. Better for longer rides, I think. So that's how those bikes felt on the road. I will, however, say these still aren't the most comfortable bikes that I've ridden. I own a Tarmac SL7 and that thing just smooths over everything. It's such a comfortable bike, and both of these bikes don't come anywhere close to that bike, which is also a race bike. My next category is weight, and I deliberately haven't weighed these bikes in because I feel like it might bias my decision a little bit. But this is just how they felt on the hills. Because of that feeling out of the saddle where it doesn't feel as flicky, as fast on the Aeroad, it's only gonna get a 5 out of 10 for me. It just does feel like a heavier bike. And I know people find it harder to spec this bike to really bring the weight down on the Aeroad. The Ultimate, on the other hand, scores a solid 9 out of 10 on weight. It really is light. If you want to make it super light, there are options out there that you can purchase and just make this thing a super light bike. I haven't given it a 10 out of 10 purely because I've ridden an Athos, and that is a really light bike. So it comes very close to the top peg, but it's not quite there. Next up on my list is the fun factor. Did I enjoy riding these bikes? Let's start with the Aeroad, and it's going to get a solid 9 out of 10. Hell yeah, I enjoyed riding this thing, especially when it's flat and rolling. You're just tucking down, you're just having fun, pulling up the top speeds. It's a really cool bike to ride. I know it hasn't actually scored that highly on some of these past features, but man, it feels fun to ride this bike just because that speed feels so high when you're on it. It feels like it accelerates quickly when you're just stomping on the pedals. It feels like you pull away from other people easier just with less effort on the pedals. The Ultimate, fun for different reasons. It does only get an 8 out of 10 because it only feels amazing when you're climbing, and there are a lot of other aspects to that, such as the flats and the rolling surfaces. And interestingly, in my mind, after coming off the bike, I've been thinking about this one more than I have this one. So I had a great time on it, but I didn't have as great of a time as on this one. I do have one final category for you, and that is the shop window or the cool factor. So this is when you sling your leg over the bike. Do you feel cool because you got a cool bike? Another thing I really love about this Aeroad is the cool factor. Well, I mean, when you look at the shop window, you're obviously not looking at the shop, you're looking at yourself, and you look at your bike and your Aeroad, and man, it looks cool. It looks very cool. So cool factor for this one is very high. Do you look at yourself in the shop window every time as you go by? As usual, we'll start with the Aeroad, and the answer is yes. This thing scores a solid 10 out of 10 on this category. I looked at myself in every single shop window that I went past. It's just a really cool bike. People look at you, people always look at the Aeroad. It's got presence, it's got show, it looks amazing. I like the paint jobs on it. Yeah, this scores a 10 out of 10. Big shop window factor. The Ultimate, on the other hand, super cool bike. I didn't feel as special on this bike. It only gets a 6 out of 10 for me. When you get on the Aeroad here, you know people are looking at you. You feel cool, you're like, yeah, I've got a cool bike. Less so with the Ultimate. It's still, I really like this bike. It's very attractive, particularly in this paint job that it's got at the moment. Might be one of my favorite paint jobs, other than my bike, of course. But I just didn't feel special when I got on the bike. That's all I've got to say for it. Doesn't score as high. So guys, there are my total scores. If I add them all up, the Ultimate scores a 79 out of 100, really high score, basically 80. And then the Aeroad scores a 69, purely because of those other factors such as comfort, handling, stuff like that, brings it down. But here's the important question. If I was gonna walk away today with one of these bikes, which would it be? Based on pure feel alone, it's gotta be this one. I enjoyed riding it more. That one's got the cool factor, it's got the fun factor, but this one feels better to ride. I had a more better time sitting on the bike. They are just my personal thoughts though. I live here in Surrey where there's more hills. If you live in places maybe like Florida where it's quite flat, this is probably going to be the bike for you. Well everyone, that has been my comparison of the Canyon Ultimate and the Canyon Aeroad. I would love to know if you guys were to walk home with one of these today, you couldn't choose between any other bike, which one would you choose? I've been Jason, this has been Cycling Unboxed. I'll see you in the next video.